Hi, welcome back. I'm Dr. Goldkamp. Today we're going to talk about something I hope you don't know that much about, and that's how to know if you have fatty liver and what to do about it. You know, I've covered this a number of times before, but each time it's on a different layer, a different way of looking at things. Right now we're going to go back in time, come forward, and end up with some labs or actionable information that you can do for yourself, okay? I promise, in the end, it's something you can do for yourself, not just an interesting story. Okay, so what can you do about it? What we're going to cover is forgotten research in medicine and when a within range common lab test signals fatty liver disease, something few doctors are going to point out, and how to interpret triglycerides over HDL, high density lipoprotein ratio, and why that's important. We've talked about this before, but not in this way. This is something most people are completely unaware of. My research was on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease does not mean there is no alcohol involved. It means it's not alcoholic, cirrhotic fatty liver disease. So technically, I'm going to give it to you straight. That means that to qualify for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, one is allowed up to 20 grams of alcohol per day for a woman and 30 grams of alcohol per day for a man. So that's 2 drinks for men and a drink and a half for a woman. Odd, I know. So when we call it non-alcoholic, what we're really saying, it's non-alcoholic cirrhotic liver disease. It's not caused by alcohol, but that could be a contributing factor. And certainly people who don't have alcohol at all are also in this, okay? So this is because some of my clients have this, but didn't know it until we started looking into their data. So it's like, huh? I have this? What do you mean I have this? So what do I do? Okay, let's go that. So how did I know about it? Okay, here's where I start, by the way, and it's just my plug for something I think should be on in every home in the United States that cares about their health, and you really have to take your own responsibility for your health. This isn't just your doctor. Few people really want to take their own responsibility. But anyway, this is a book called Nutritional Medicine. It has been the accumulation of a lifetime of experience by one Dr. Alan Gaby, who used to be one of my professors at med school back at Bastyr back in the 1990s. This is what it costs. Hardcover $195. Ebook is $195. Ebook is great because you can access it online and it's just tremendous. Enough said, I have both. I love both. It basically helps me be comprehensive and to build on what I've read. I don't have to worry about anything that's mentioned in that book is absolutely true. It's verified research. Whereas current research, you have to go through who paid for it, is there any conflict of interest, and really read between the lines of conflict of interest. So there's a lot of propaganda that is stuffed into current research, not like it used to be, as we'll find out today. So from this, under non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, I came when I carved out this particular piece of information, which I covered before, but this brought a whole new light to it. So I'm going to read it to you. Choline, what we're going to function on, choline functions as a methyl donor. Not new, but just keep this in the back of your mind. Inadequate dietary intake of methyl groups in general, it's a big word, right? A lot of things have methyl groups. Impair liver fat metabolism, which leads to fatty liver. Rats and dogs fed choline deficient diet developed fatty liver. In rats, the development of fatty liver induced by feeding 15% sucrose, a sugar, sucrose, which is fructose, and sucrose and glucose is fructose, was prevented by increasing the amount of choline in the diet. Fatty liver from sugar was terrible if choline was deficient. It was improved tremendously by adding choline. That's the point. Studies have shown that a common genetic polymorphisms of an enzyme involved in choline biosynthesis, PEMT, I have a number of videos on this, are associated with an increased risk of fatty liver or muscle damage in response to a low choline diet. Do you know anybody on a low choline diet? Do you know anybody who's afraid to eat eggs? Do you know anybody who's afraid to eat liver? They're on a low choline diet. Okay, approximately 75% of the population, we're speaking of the Western general but specific United States, has the polymorphism of PEMT. Among women fed a low choline diet, less than 50 grams per day, those who had this polymorphism were 25 times more likely to develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, now that you know what that is, and or muscle damage. And to that you can add dementia, early Alzheimer's, and cognitive impairment. than those without this polymorphisms. That's 25 times more. I put down, please read this twice. Please read this twice. Because it's not just double or triple, it's 25 times higher. Huge. No such association was seen in men. These observations suggest that genetic factors influence choline requirements. Right now, you can sort of be a little sarcastic and say, duh, but this actually, most people don't believe that. Most people believe it's one size fits all. Certainly, a lot of YouTube gurus that talk about nutrition, it's a one size fits all approach. This is all you need. They're wrong, but yet the desire to simplify it, you do this one thing and your life will change, it's not that way. Some individuals are particularly susceptible to the adverse effects of low choline. These people with this, in this particular case, this polymorphisms and a few others, genetic mutations if you will, set themselves up not for a terrible life, but just simply a greater need for choline. They need more choline to be normal. All right? More choline to be normal. That's the plus here. Even among patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and normal choline status, choline supplementation might have a positive influence on liver lipid metabolism. One study caught my eye from Dr. Gaby's nutritional medicine book, and that is this one. I love it when there's old research and he goes back and he gets the basic research. This is from before marketing was infiltrating medical research, before everything had to have a hook. So the British Medical Journal, and this is actually a Canadian team out of the University of Toronto, liver damage produced by feeding alcohol or sugar, and its prevention by choline. Seriously? Alcohol and sugar? They're comparing, so in 1949, just after World War II, they're comparing alcohol with sugar as being equally toxic to the liver. That's 74 years ago. Right now, people are just discovering that. Wow, sugar, oh, fructose. They feel they're so smart by saying that. This is 74 years ago. Did you hear that it was 74 years ago? All right, also I want you to notice I boxed in one particular name, C.H. Best, MD. And he has 3 other people from the University of Toronto. Who are these guys? As Paul Newman said in the Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. Here's a link for this particular article, and I hope you look it up. All right, I'm going to tell you who these people are. Back in 1921, Dr. Banting and Charles Best were the first to successfully isolate the human hormone insulin for the first time ever. So consequently, people who had type 1 diabetes, which are not producing enough insulin, they now have insulin they can take and their life suddenly became normal. Type 1 diabetics died before, in the late teens, if not earlier. That team, Dr. Banting and Charles Best, 2 years later, they were awarded the Nobel Prize. But a little explanation here. Dr. Best worked in a lab that was McLeod, Dr. McLeod's. And so the Nobel Prize went to Banting and McLeod since Banting was at McLeod's lab. However, it was Charles Best, who was a graduate student at the time working with Banting. Banting split his share, his 50% of the Nobel Prize money with Best. What a guy. Amazing. These are Toronto doctors on track of diabetes, and this is 1921 in March. There's Best as a grad student and Banting. Dr. Banting died in a plane crash in 1949. That's why you don't hear anything of him after that. So this study in 1949, 74 years ago, did you hear about the 74 years ago? The above experiments showed that ethanol can cause an excessive accumulation of fat in the liver and subsequent fibrosis. So alcoholic fatty liver was pretty common. Alcoholics get a bad liver and they eventually die of liver, right? Or they get a liver replacements now. So that was kind of known. So a non-alcoholic, those who are not alcoholics, a social alcoholic, but they can have some alcohol, as we talked about, and pure sugar caused lesions of a similar nature and extent. Both lesions were entirely prevented by choline and its precursors, methionine, which you basically get from meat. We'll get into that a little later. That's amazing. Entirely prevented by choline. So this experimental evidence established the fact that a specific dietary deficiency of choline is involved in the production of liver damage. 74 years ago. After this study, it was completely forgotten for 74 years, or at least 70 years. And only now is it coming back as a concept. It was already there. Why was that? You can guess, I can guess. I think we both know why that happened. Okay, so the point is, this is the first time sugar, sucrose, was shown to be worse than alcohol on the liver, and both were due to an induced choline deficiency. Right after this research, it was forgotten for the next 70 years. So I've done about 13 videos on cognition, choline, why using choline and why you need it. So that's covered. These are these are the titles of my different videos. Feel free to explore it, but it really needs to be mentioned again and again and again and again. It's very important. The point of all that is choline deficiency is directly associated with fatty liver, specifically non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But there's the lab triglycerides over HDL ratio, triglycerides over HDL. What does that show us? Let's take a look. I want to show you that basically I do a lot of labs. I do actually 3 different kinds of panels on people. We're not going to go into all that, but I want to give you a little context. Context is important to understanding your health. We are not one size fits all. We are different enough and important enough in those differences that they need to be addressed, okay? Need to be identified and they need to be addressed to bring us back to health. That's how it works in my world. So this is just a look at a lot of the labs that I look at. Obviously glucose, thyroid, lipid panel, we'll get to that, blood work, and so on and so forth. But what I want to show you is really, I've repositioned some of these. There's omega-3/6, we're not going to get into that. Carnitine, vitamin D, homocysteine, we're not going to get into that either, other videos for that. What I want to show you is this. I want to show you triglycerides. Triglycerides is this row right here. You can see the word over there, an HDL. And then you have the triglyceride HDL ratio down here. This trigs over HDL ratio is actually used as one of the 3 ways that I calculate for insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is officially used by HOMA-IR. That's this particular test. I do 2 others, and Triggs HDL is very helpful. Triggs HDL is actually used internationally, especially in economically challenged environments. And so in the very poor areas of the world, you need something simple you can run on people right there. You're not going to send it off to the lab, okay? And this is one of those labs. That's why it's so popular. So I compare this. So these are all the people that are insulin resistant in this particular page of people that I've seen. And these are non-insulin resistant. So I want to show you, you can say, yeah, well, look at these people that are insulin resistant. They have check, check, check. Some, all 3. Red means, yes, they're clearly that. But yet you have this one in the middle that is insulin resistance by a lot. Insulin resistance, HOMA-IR, you just need to be over 1.4. Clearly insulin resistance, but not insulin resistance by this one. And not insulin resistance by that one. Close, but not. Many physicians would look at this and go, well, good. You know, you have good numbers for your triglycerides, 59 and 62. That's excellent. Most doctors would only be taking fasting glucose. They wouldn't do insulin, which is this person, it's huge. They wouldn't do hemoglobin A1C unless they are an endocrinologist for the most part, or a diabetic doctor. And so they're just stuck with this. And the comment they would give their patients, and I know this for a fact, the comments they would give their patients is, you know, you should work on getting that down, but it's not a problem yet. And by the way, your triglycerides and HDL are wonderful, so you're moving in the right direction. But that's absolutely not true. That's absolutely the wrong way to look at this. And there's other ways. We can make comparisons to cholesterol and so on and so forth. We will get into that a little bit. I just jumped from choline to triglycerides and HDL ratio. Why did I do that? They both have to do with fatty liver, and we're going to get into it. As I said, we're going to end up with something you can do that is both effective, personally identify some of those differences we talked about, and you can address it. Okay, so triglycerides HDL ratio, it is very important. Very important. So the background, diabetes mellitus is a major global health challenge. It leads to increased risk of cardiovascular disease by causing insulin resistance. You knew that, I just showed you that. So the raised triglyceride HDL has been regarded as one of the valid markers for insulin resistance. I wanted you to know that. This is from a research paper down here in 2021 in India. Remember I told you about, they find this very, very valuable. Okay, conclusion, among all the various markers of insulin resistance, trigs over HDL ratio is the simplest to assess. It's kind of the back of the napkin approach is the way I say it. So trig HDL ratio, a marker for insulin resistance and atherosclerosis and prediabetes or not? The answer is yes. I'm going to show you a few studies because I want to hit this from different ways, okay? Here's one that came out actually in the mid 2015. It's from the Cooper Medical Athletic Establishment in Dallas. So the combinations of cardiorespiratory fitness and triglycerides over HDL ratio with risk of heart attack, coronary heart disease mortality. Over 40,000 men followed for 16 plus years. That's a lot of people, a lot of men for a pretty significant period of time, 78 to 2010. Oh my gosh. So here's what they did. So they're doing fitness. They're comparing physical fitness on the triglyceride HDL ratio to the risk of having a heart attack, coronary heart disease mortality. Heart attack! Okay, and here's what this looks like. These are different groups. So right down here's your trigs over HDL ratio. What you want, under 1.5, you're not insulin resistant. Over 1.5, you are insulin resistant, and the higher it is, the worse you are. Okay, there you go. So trig over HDL is in the bottom, and you have these groupings from below 1.5, 1.5 to 1.4, 2.4, 2.4 to 3.9, and so they get worse. These 4 groups, percentiles, if you will. So each one here is high, moderate, and low represents their fitness level. So high fitness level, moderate fitness level, low for each group. And here's what's interesting. Notice in each group, they all have the same trig HDL ratio, but the high fitness group have a lower. So they have the same trig HDL. I want you to know that, same trig HDL number, but the higher the fitness, the lower the risk of a heart attack. So the higher the fitness, the lower the risk of the heart attack, regardless of every group until the group got really pretty bad. So when the whole group was really around 4, the risk is pretty high. And here, arguably, the high and moderate fitness were about the same, but low fitness was the worst in every one. Worst, 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 worst. That's fitness, risk of heart attack as measured by triglyceride HDL. Okay? I want you to see how they broke this down. The low fit was the bottom 20%, then the middle 40%, then the top 40%. So according to the trigs to HDL ratio, what I just read you, 1.5, bop, bop, bop. So what you have is cardiovascular fitness is a singular factor that lowers the risk, but it didn't necessarily lower the trigs to HDL number. Even though all the men in group 1 had a low risk HDL ratio numbers, their fitness level further lowered that, the higher fitness within that number. So you have a number and you have the fitness level. And they go into how they measure the fitness if you really want to get into that, okay? So that's what I want you to know. That's interesting, but I want you to know that they're using triglyceride HDL as a vital data point. So to emphasize the importance of trigs HDL ratio, more of the same. Trigs over HDL ratio and relative risk of heart attack. I just told you that, but this is straightforward. This is just saying, forget about the fitness part, the risk of heart attack goes up. And remember, 1.5, right between this, the white space between these two is below that, you're not insulin resistant. Above that, you are. So notice it's a huge jump. NMR spectroscopy is when you look at, are you a pattern A or a pattern B relative to your LDL. So your LDL, which is part of your, right, your LDL and your total cholesterol, your LDL, low density lipoprotein, is either big and fluffy or it's small and oxidized. Small and oxidized is dangerous, big and fluffy is fine. And this is what this shows. But it shows it relative, the pattern's relative to that triglycerides HDL pattern. Here's the ratio down here. Trigs HDL gets bigger, bigger, bigger. I put in the 1.5, right? Below 1.5 is good. You're not insulin resistant. Over 1.5, you are. So what this means is if your triglycerides over HDL ratio is over 1.5, you see it falls off. You quickly fall out of the good pattern, which is pattern B, which is the good pattern, the big and fluffy. And it quickly, your LDL becomes small and oxidized. And there's the small and oxidized getting to be the predominant pattern of these ratios. So that came out in 2004. So now you know 2 things. There again, here's pattern B, which is small dense LDL versus HDL. Small dense LDL versus HDL. Triglycerides versus HDL. So here we go. We find just on serum HDL, that's a test you can get, HDL, everybody wants to test their good cholesterol. You want your good cholesterol to be up there, right? So as your good cholesterol does get up there, you get into a better pattern, all right? That's all this shows. Here's low HDL, that's bad. Here's a recommended range that even conventional doctors talk about. You should have your HDL, that's over here. So that's true, that's good. That's a good range. You move out of that. You move out of the bad range, the bad pattern, into the good pattern. Same here for triglycerides. High triglycerides back here, very bad. Low triglycerides is good. So we're talking about the same thing, the triglycerides over HDL. And that's in 1990. So what I'm saying is we knew this 30, 35 years ago. This is not new news. And it's been used for a long time, but most people don't know about this. This is something you can do for yourself when you get to it. So here's what you need to know and you can do for yourself to understand your context and your situation. Here are the labs you need to get. So you have triglycerides, HDL, and obviously you can make your own ratio, triglyceride over HDL, insulin, and glucose. These are all fasting. 1, 2, 3, 4 tests. 4 tests you need to get fasting. You get that, you can calculate your ratio, and you can do more. Okay, to that, if you want to, you can add total cholesterol, because everybody talks about total cholesterol, and your LDL. It's optional, it's not essential, because we're looking to see where your insulin resistance is. But if you like to have these other numbers, do it. I'll show you what it costs. So once you have these labs, you can calculate these references for insulin resistance. You'll be able to calculate your HOMA-IR. You'll be able to calculate your insulin resistance via natural log right here. You'll be able to calculate, obviously, your triglycerides over HDL ratio. Very important. So you now will be able to know, where do you fit into all this, right? You can compare yourself right here. Are you in the non-insulin resistant group, or are you in the insulin resistance group? When I went over my clients, a lot of them ended up over here, had no idea that they were insulin resistant, had no idea they were fatty liver, which is the point of this particular video. When you go to HOMA-IR, you just go to this particular link and you plug in your fasting insulin and you plug in your fasting glucose, period, and you will get your number. That's where we get this middle run number here, okay? So you will do that for you. So now we're looking at this particular triglyceride HDL number, and let's say, so how could we possibly know by these numbers that somebody has fatty liver? How can we possibly know that? This number here, this one that I've been pointing out to you, is not just an outlier. We're now going to look at the larger context. All right, so now we spelled it out. We say, I told you that his doctor would say, well, your glucose, fasting glucose is a little high, doesn't know about your insulin, doesn't know about your hemoglobin 1AC, but he says, wow, your HDL is okay. You know, it's not terribly low, and your triglycerides are actually really pretty good. You're doing okay. Just work on your glucose is what the parting comment would be. All right, I'm saying this guy is in the beginning, or woman is in the beginning of liver failure. Is in the beginning of liver failure. And I know that because of this particular number. All right, so there's the context. Your doctor would probably tell you you're doing very well, according to your triglycerides and HDL level being within range. Okay, let's look more closely. So here we go. Here's your triglycerides, HDL level, and this is my data. These are my data now from my group of people that I can mess with, right? So here's what we have. Across the bottom is your triglycerides HDL ratio. Right? And so we know that on your triglyceride HDL ratio, I could have put in a 1.5, would have made this a bit busy though. There's that line. So anything over here on this side of that, it's not insulin resistance. That's why, wow, these numbers are really pretty good. But when we look at HOMA-IR, remember the insulin and the fasting glucose, we find this is a number goes up here. These are all insulin resistant. So this person that I've been showing you is clearly insulin resistant. Wow, by a lot. Because you just need to be over 1.4 for HOMA-IR. And he's way under 1.5 for his trigs and HDL. Here's the trend line of all my data of all my clients right here. So he or she is in this particular area. So the combination of a high HOMA-IR, high insulin resistance with low triglycerides, with low HDL, triglyceride over HDL, is a bad combination. Not a good combination. High insulin resistance, low trigs, HDL. Something's not right. One's liver, how to interpret this now, one's liver is getting fatter. It's getting fatter. So the conventional medical approach to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is lifestyle modification, then statins, then bariatric surgery. So how is one's liver getting fatter? It can't release the liver. So what we're seeing is, why does this not make sense? Why, if the triglyceride HDL ratio is so accurate, I've just told you how so accurate, and all those studies said this is such a wonderful test, right? From the Cooper Poopers, as they say in Dallas, their lab in Dallas, to India, and so on and so forth. It's a wonderful test. It's a cheap back of the napkin to do. Wait a minute. Why are these appearing, these appearing normal and not way out of range, given the glucose of 113 and the insulin of 26, fasting insulin, and the hemoglobin 1AC of 6.1 and the HOMA-IR of 7. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is it, right? This is what we're seeing. This is the ratio that is supposed to be so wonderful. These are their numbers, which are good by most docs. If you just had to look at these two, you say, yeah, they're okay. HDL could be a little bit higher, and triglycerides are pretty much right on the nose. It's like, okay, and then you throw in glucose, that's a bit high, maybe, counsel them a little bit. But that's it. We're missing something. We're missing a big picture. The reason your triglycerides and HDL is low in this particular case, it's the liver is losing its ability to get the fat, because glucose comes in, gets turned into triglycerides. The triglycerides get shoved into the bloodstream. Well, when you lack choline and a few other issues, when you're insulin resistant, you stop losing that ability. Your liver starts to shut down. It no longer has the capacity to get the fat out of the liver into the form of triglycerides. So your triglycerides should be really high, but your liver is starting to fail. So your triglycerides are becoming lower and lower into the normal range. Bad news, very bad news. Okay, here's what I want to show you now. So you've seen this before. These are the contexts, right? Here's the person we're following, right? That has an inconsistency, really high insulin resistance, and yet the triglyceride HDL is good, and so it's beginning to fail. How do we know that? Where else can we look? Well, now we look down and we look at nutrient deficiencies. First of all, what I want you to see is just look at all the nutrient deficiencies that exist with insulin-resistant people. Far fewer nutritional deficiencies with non-insulin resistant people. So what I showed you here, isn't it interesting? We've talked about choline, that there's three people here are identifiably deficient in choline, and we just learned about that's associated with fatty liver. Totally makes sense. This is a whole nother panel. Okay, we also are looking at B12 deficiency, folate deficiency, glutathione deficiency, all over the place. I colored those in because all of those have to do with methylation, as does choline. So folate, glutathione, choline, B12, and you can throw in a little B2 as well. These are really important in terms of methylation. So it's no coincidence. So when you put that lab together, so if this guy, the doctor to this particular person said, all right, well, you got 113 for fasting glucose, that's not great, but this is fine, and by the way, your cholesterol's 203, you're doing a really good job. Well, the reason your cholesterol's so low is because your liver is starting to fail. Okay, and there's your inflammation, the CRP. So given all that, now it starts to make perfect sense, but most doctors don't look this way. This is not really the point of medicine. Medicine is to make sure that you're not dying, not that you're not healthy. Remember when I told you this? Common genetic polymorphism, SNP, involved in choline biosynthesis for this particular mutation, PEMT, was associated with increased risk of developing fatty liver, muscle damage in response to low choline diet. Approximately 75% of the population had this mutation. And among women who had this mutation, who had a deficient diet, choline deficient diet, were 25 times more likely to develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and muscle damage, and to that you can add dementia, than those without the polymorphism. That's huge. That's a big difference. It wasn't just once or twice or triple. It was 25 times more likely. Huge. So this explains why some women get a lot of gallstones. In med school, we had a mnemonic about who got gallstones, and that was fair, meaning blonde, 40, female, and fat. So this is why. These are some of these polymorphisms. There's the PEMT one we talked about. And this particular person we've been following happens to be a woman, and she's homozygous. So she's got at least one polymorphism for that. She also has other contributory problematic polymorphisms she's heterozygous for. She's homozygous for these down here. That's what the red stands for the most part. So she's compromised in her ability, or actually I should say she's much more vulnerable. She needs a higher amount of choline to be normal. So if she doesn't know enough about, hey, have your liver and have your eggs, or at least have a supplement that has choline in it to get yourself up, she's going to run into problems. She'll have the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. She'll have perhaps early onset dementia. She'll have muscle problems, if not disease. Here's another way of looking at it. I'm not going to go too far down here, but this is what we look at: genomic area problem areas of this particular person. This says here's around methylation, MTHFR, and related mutations around this that she has. Who cares what it is? It has to do with methylation and folate. So she has a problem there. She has a problem here, and she has a problem there. So do you think collectively she may have a problem with homocysteine or have a problem with glutathione? Absolutely she would, and does. Okay, so in short, jumping through all this, in short, why this genetic thing, this little variable that most people don't want to listen to because they want to believe in a one size fits all. I don't want to listen to all the details, that's going to make it that I'm different than everybody else. In short, it goes like this. If this doesn't work, this pimped pathway, this doesn't work, a person, man or woman, will not be able to make phosphatidylcholine. And so the body's not completely dependent on this particular pathway, but it's very dependent on it. Now, there's other ways of squeaking out some phosphatidylcholine, because if you didn't make any, you'd be dead. All right, so this is the majority of the ability to make phosphatidylcholine, and to make choline, which you can do, is decreased. And if you can't make phosphatidylcholine, which affects every membrane of every cell in your body, you will have problems. And the problems will be, so all these other things you cannot make, I'm not going to go into that now, but I'm going to jump right up over here. You cannot make acetylcholine, which has a lot to do with muscle and has a lot to do with brain. And the problem ends up here. And this is what we're talking about. This is why women get earlier and a greater majority of dementia than men. All right, so now when you look at this person, for instance, and as this is just pulled out, look at their blood sugar levels, right? Insulin resistance means insulin's not working very well for you. So we look at CGM, continual glucose monitors. Look how high the blood sugars are. A good blood sugar should be really bouncing around 70 to 100 in my world. 70 to 100. She's up to 300, and no doctor has told her 350 is bad. No, this is not fasting, but her fasting glucose was 113 on that particular one. Oh my gosh. So here we go. This is after dinner, 350. So her low for the day was, she had maybe 150 was her lowest for the day. It's huge. This needs to be addressed. This is just more of the patterns. Here was after, just to say after dinner. So these rows after dinner. So here's a correlation of what she ate on a particular day with that pattern. Here's the pattern, the same rise after dinner, and here's what she had. Coffee, chicken breast, skinless. Why skinless? Supposedly low fat is what she's been convinced of. Plantains, ripe, that's candy, very high glucose food. White rice, very high glucose food. Diet Coke, obviously she's concerned about her weight. Cake with fruit, can't be that concerned. Oranges, raw, can't be that concerned. But it's not a criticism. This is lack of being instructed that these are things you should avoid. So do you see any correlations between the CGM, continual glucose monitor, and chronometer? Absolutely. Look at the amount of protein she had that day. 48 grams. Basically, she should be bringing in 125 to 130 grams of protein per day. Carbs, roughly 200, and she could cut down severely. You can get by on a ketogenic diet would be 20. This is where we're headed with her, but just gives you a sense of this is the average person going along, and there you go with these particular things. So we now need to intervene. Let's look at trigs over HDL, the ratio we've been talking about, the back of the napkin, the great lab we've heard so much about with age. Well, it tends to go down with age. What this means is people who are 80, who live this long, have healthier levels of triglycerides HDL. So it rings true. Here was another person I took who was 46-year-old male, and this was his level of triglycerides HDL. So when you compare it to the norm, you go, wait a minute, it's low. Remember we talked about it being low? You go, oh, it's great, it's a good number. You're getting us below 1.5, so you're not insulin resistant. No, his liver is starting to fail. This was what low is like in context of high insulin resistance. So what this is showing is people who live longer have lower triglyceride HDL ratios than those who live longer have healthier trigs HDL ratios than younger people. Okay, trigs HDL relative to pounds overweight. This again is from my data, from all the people. I put them into these. This is called a scatter plot. We talked about that in the last video. So here we go. Here's insulin resistance. This is weight gained. I could have done BMI, basal metabolic index, but I decided to go pounds overweight was better, more relatable. So yes, the trig HDL goes up with pounds overweight. That's with obesity, right? So this shows there is a strong relationship between trig's HDL ratio and pounds overweight. When was the last time your doctor told you that? Probably not. Probably never. Triglycerides over glucose. As your glucose goes up, your triglycerides go up. As your glucose goes up, your HDL goes up. So as your glucose goes up, your triglycerides over HDL ratio is going to go up, right? As your insulin goes up, because your glucose went up, your triglycerides are going to go up. So what can help decrease triglycerides and increase HDL? Let's look at it. So triglycerides, and here's omega-3, fish oil. So as your omega-3 goes up, and this is your ideal level of omega-3 is 8, which is 8% of your red blood cell membrane. So when you hit an 8, that will help to bring down your triglycerides. It's something you can do. Here's your omega-3 index, bringing down your trigs HDL. Here's your omega-3 index, ideal level, as I showed you about before. This will help bring down your triglycerides HDL. Triglycerides HDL and vitamin D. So as you get your vitamin D up, look at this, vitamin D between 60 and 100. I would say this is where we should all be. So whether you get that by sunlight or by supplementation, that's entirely up to you, but get the numbers there. That will help bring down your trigs HDL, make you less insulin resistance, help your liver. Above this line, insulin resistance. Below this line, no insulin resistance. So what else is related to triglycerides HDL? Vitamin D. Okay, I'm going to end with going back to the labs, what you need to order for yourself. Real straightforward. Here's where I recommend everybody should go. I don't get a penny out of this, believe it or don't believe it. I don't get a penny out of this. This is Ultra Lab tests. You can go online. Yes, this is my portal. Why would you care about use my portal? I don't really care if you use my portal or not. I get nothing out of this. This is just where I know how to use all this. So you go into the portal. This is what it looks like. You order your labs here, and you can find a location. This is Quest. Ultra Labs uses Quest. When clients work with me, I use LabCorp. But here we go. I'm going to show you what it actually costs. Then you find out where you live in the country and where you need to get your blood drawn taken, okay? All right. These are the labs you need to order. And they do not cost very much at all. Okay, order these tests. You're going to order a lipid panel, which includes total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, and triglycerides, okay? Pretty cool. Then you're going to order a fasting glucose levels, which is incidental. Then you're going to order a fasting insulin level. Your total cost will be $26 plus a blood draw at $8. This price varies throughout the country. I don't care if it's $30, $50, or $100. Let's call it $100, which is not that at all. It's probably going to be $30 or what, $30 or $40. Do this. This is probably the most important thing you can do for yourself. I really hope you take action and do this. Okay, I've covered more on this, on labs to order for yourself on this particular video. I did it a while ago. The link is above. And always remember, the choice is always yours. And it's your responsibility to learn about being healthy. So if this is something that you're interested in, that is a topic that I obviously go deeper in terms of labs, in terms of how to do it, in terms of why you would want to do it, various topics, as you've seen that I've done in the past, then please let me know below in a comment. Till then.